great to be here. Of course, I am a huge fan of TPPF. I've been, as you said, around for about 13 years, and I know that the state of Texas, and really our whole nation, would not be the same but for the input and the efforts of TPPF. So thank you for your support of that organization. They truly make a difference in Texas and the entire country. You know, it wasn't that long ago that we could easily say that the president's use of the EPA to further his agenda was easily his most blatant example of overreach. That may still be the case, but over the last couple of years, he's done everything he can to make that a much tougher call. In fact, it appears that he has given up on the democratic process and started sidestepping Congress on everything from forcing through his appointments, as we've seen, to granting amnesty to millions of illegal immigrants, which you all know we're involved in. That doesn't even include the use of the IRS to target and suppress the free speech of Tea Party groups. Considering all this, his overreaches through the EPA seems almost quaint. But just because they're a more familiar form of his executive activism doesn't make his actions through the EPA any less dangerous. In fact, we know that the EPA, by taking its cues from the fringiest edges of the president's activist base, can do immense amounts of damage to the state and national economies. And just as dangerous, it can undermine the balance in our federal system, which protects the sovereignty of the state as a bulwark of freedom for the people against an oppressive, centralized government in Washington. Today, through your poll data, you're confirming on paper something we've suspected all along. People simply don't trust the EPA. And why should they? The EPA is not in the business of building public trust. It's in the business of appeasement. That appeasement of a small segment of Americans who believe any sort of industrial development is automatically a bad thing and must be aggressively targeted by Washington. That's certainly not the way it looks when you look at the president's Clean Power Plan. Again, this is an example of the president forcing through what he couldn't accomplish legislatively. In this case, enacting programs like cap and trade. Instead, he's effectively put them into place by massively expanding his personal power, by expanding the power of the EPA. This program will result in the premature retirement of existing power plants, damaging the reliability of our electric grid, and resulting in significantly higher energy costs for businesses and consumers alike. Moreover, this plan violates the very Clean Air Act he relies upon by treating the entire state as a source of pollution. If his plan goes into effect, expect energy costs to spike 20% in the coming years. So make no mistake, Texas will be challenging this plan in court along with many other states. Because compliance costs on the president's plan will be massive, more than $28 billion annually through 2030, according to a recent study commissioned by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Because Texas is a rapidly growing state and we need more reliable energy, not less, and because Texas required reductions would be vastly out of proportion to other states. While Texas produces, get this, 11% of the electricity in the United States under the proposed rules, Texas would be required to contribute 18% of the overall national reduction. So very unfair. In order to meet that mandate, Texas would have to slash carbon emissions by 38%. And get this, pay attention to this, 13 states have final emission goals that are less stringent than Texas' current emission levels. Even though from 2000 to 2010, Texas reduced its emissions by almost twice as much as California. Remember, Texans already breathe much cleaner air than they did in 2000, with nitrous oxide emissions and ozone level down over 15 years, despite rapid population growth and economic growth. Texas has demonstrated clearly that you can have cleaner air without destroying the energy sector. That's the part that drives the activists nuts, and I'm okay with that. Rather than see what we've done, which would make sense, and why it's working, the EPA instead wants to bring the hammer down on Texas. That is enough evidence to prove to me that this is more about ideology than results, and about the president's war on coal and fossil fuels. But what does all this really mean for us? Why is it important to the people of Texas, and why is it imperative that we fight back against this aggressive approach, wherever it presents itself? Because if you sum it up, what people really need to successfully launch a new business or expand one that's already thriving is predictability. They need to know how much it's going to cost to comply with regulations. They need to know that they have a reliable source of energy. They need to know what's going forward, they're going to have a fair chance to expand, and that they won't get strangled in red tape and bureaucracy. It's troubling because the only thing certain about the EPA is that they're going to continue expanding their reach, adding to that already daunting mountain of regulation. And remember this, you can't spell unpredictability without EPA. Think about it. The more the EPA takes control of, we're already awaiting new rules regarding the waters of the United States, or sometimes known as WOTUS, the more it makes people who want to create jobs less confident about their likelihood of success. Overregulation stifles growth, kills existing jobs, and hinders the creation of new ones. That's why we continue to fight. That's why we'll continue to fight back against the Clean Power Plan. That's why we'll fight back against WOTUS, which seeks to vastly expand the definition of waters under federal control from the original navigable waters to include almost any piece of land that gets wet and creates puddles. The good news is Texas has already had success in court against these sorts of issues. We challenged the greenhouse gas rules, including the tailoring provision. We forced the EPA to follow law as written, not just in a politically expedient manner. The process exposed the EPA's efforts of trying to regulate greenhouse gases without the authority of Congress. In a separate case, the Supreme Court determined that the EPA may have unlawfully applied its transport rule, also known as the Cross-State Air Pollution Rule, or CSAPR, which limits air pollution crossing state lines. That's now in the DC Circuit, and we're confident in our case, but at a minimum, we've bought some time for business owners to create contingency plans. But the fight against the EPA is not just about protecting private property, saving jobs, growing the economy, and letting states make decisions about how best to protect the environment. The fight is about the erosion of self-government under our Constitution. It's about the abuse of power by unelected bureaucrats and the rise of the administrative state. It's the progressives' dream to have rule by the so-called experts, because in their eyes, the people of America and Texas cannot be trusted to govern themselves or understand their own self-interest. We'll continue fighting the EPA, slowing or hopefully stopping the threat to liberty of Texans and erosion of our constitutional values. And I'd certainly like to thank TPPF for all their hard work in helping us with an edge in this fight, and for having me here today. And thank you all, and as always, God bless our great state of Texas. Thank you very much.